I'm actually one of the newest solar system ambassadors. I just got appointed officially in January and had to go through a couple months worth of training. I really am interested in the women of NASA because I wanted to be one of the women of NASA. And if I couldn't be that for real, then I might as well talk about it. So let's get into the program here. Is that my mother worked for the B.F. Goodrich Company, and she worked on the assembly line, working with sneakers. And one of the things she did was she actually, because she was so good at what she was doing, she was actually selected as one of the 2 people at B.F. Goodrich, which was at Watertown at that point. She got selected to work on the original boots for the Mercury astronauts. So if you wonder where some of my interest came in terms of being interested in NASA, that was part of it. She came home and talked about it and soon became interested over the next couple of years. So here's Kitty O'Brien Joyner, who was the first women engineer. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is a lot of the firsts that happened with women in NASA. She was hired in 1939, so NASA was a little bit before its time. And she was the first woman to complete her degree in electrical engineering from the University of Virginia. She managed several supersonic wind tunnels. And if you know anything about space and rockets, you know that wind tunnels are very, very important. And they're critical for testing new aircraft design on the ground before it gets into flight. Here's Annie Easley. She answered a newspaper ad in 1954 to do mathematical calculations at what was then NACA. And that was the precursor to NASA. And that was the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. And she ended up working her way up to writing computer code for some of NASA's most important rockets. Jerry Cobb. And in 1960, Jerry applied to become one of the first astronauts. And they had about a dozen women who went into the very first training program. And she passed. She was the only woman who passed all of NASA's training programs to become an astronaut. However, how they ended up keeping her out of the astronaut training program is they determined that only men were fit for space exploration, based on the requirement that astronauts had to have, at that time, military test pilot experience, and back then, women weren't allowed as test pilots. Here's Cecilia Vivi, a very interesting story about her. She was an artist employed by a contractor that NASA had, the Chrysler Aerospace contractor, and that was in 1962. And as the first American to orbit Earth, John Glenn decided to name his Mercury spacecraft the Friendship 7. And he wanted the script art, you can see the script art on the side of his capsule there. And he wanted to have that painted on the Mercury space capsule as it was standing atop the Atlas rocket enclosed in the gantry at Cape Canaveral. But they didn't let women up there. So she was not allowed to go up there until he caused a big scene, and so they eventually gave in to him. John Glenn was one of those people that they gave into several times. Katherine Johnson, okay? If you know the story of Hidden Figures, you know the story is all about Katherine Johnson and her being a mathematician. One thing that, if you saw the movie and didn't read the book or didn't do any research on her, you did not know that she actually was there for the launch of Alan Shepard in 1961. And so she was involved in putting together the rocket flight trajectories for Alan Shepard in 61. And then she ended up doing the orbital mission for John Glenn in 1962. She also went on to calculate the Apollo 11 moon missions and made sure that Apollo 11 made it home safely.
Yes, they said, no, we'll let her go ahead. I wanted to know what it was they were looking for. So I wound up doing what it was they were trying to find out.
Commander Alan B. Shepard was to become the first man sent into suborbital flight. The Mercury capsule is right on course.
Our office computed over every mission that went out at that time. the height, the speed, and so on. It became a geometry problem.
Ignition sequence start.
I felt most proud of the success of the Apollo mission.